Hi, I'm Dave, founder of Halloween Year Round. I'm coming to you from an undisclosed monarch outpost located somewhere on Hollow Earth. Oh wait, I just forget I said that. It's supposed to be undisclosed. Anyways, I'm sitting here wearing another cinematic universe's merchandise to talk about this cinematic universe. And which cinematic universe do I mean? I mean the Monsterverse, the one that began with Gareth Edwards' 2014 reboot of Godzilla and continues until this very year with Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire. Weird title, I know. This was a series that kind of from the beginning we knew they were going to bring in King Kong, and we knew that they were doing like a universe. But other than Godzilla and King Kong, like we haven't really gotten any other movies from any of the other monsters. And I mean, Kong only got one, so I feel like mostly like the Godzilla universe with a couple TV shows that everyone forgets existed. Speaking of which, this ranking, I'm just looking at the 5 movies in the Monsterverse, the 5 theatrically released movies. I thought about counting Monarch and then the Netflix series Skull Island. I like both of those shows for different reasons. I think they kind of help provide some, context and further background and almost like the appendix of a book. So I don't dislike those series. I just think trying to compare them to the movies, it's 2 apples and oranges, and it'd be too hard to compare them. So I'm just focused on the 5 movies. And without further ado, Godzilla, can I take it away? All right, here we go. Number 5, Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire. All right, call it recency bias or call it whatever you want to call it. I'm not saying I didn't have fun with this movie. I'm not saying that, God, Kong picking up Mini Kong and using him like a club, or the Skull King, or Godzilla and Kong having a weird, fun fight at the pyramids of Giza or the Colosseum stuff. I'm not saying that any or all of that stuff isn't fun. But let's be honest, this is a dumb movie. But like it's supposed to be dumb. So it understands the assignment, and I think that you really started to see this series kind of go more and more into like camp and like intentional, B movie type stuff with Godzilla versus Kong. This movie it goes it dives headfirst into Hollow Earth with it. So I'm not saying I don't dislike any of these movies, and when I put this ranking at at the least, I'm just saying out of all of them, this is the one that I think is the least well made, least interesting story, least interesting human characters. To be fair, it does kind of give Kong a character arc that I feel like he didn't really get even in his own movie. So there's a lot I like about it, and I had fun seeing this in IMAX. It was a great time. It's just it's a B movie. It's a blockbuster budget sci-fi channel movie. Number 4, Godzilla versus Kong. So this is where I feel like you had the introduction of Hollow Earth and that whole idea in Kong Skull Island. You kind of have more of a talked about in King of the Monsters, but both of those movies and very much so Godzilla 2014 took themselves very, very seriously. And with varying degrees of success, and when you take yourself seriously, you can't get away with as much camp. Godzilla versus Kong, again, much like the last movie on the list, it's fun and it's great to see those characters, on screen for the first time since the 1962 King Kong versus Godzilla, which, yes, I had a VHS tape of when I was a kid, and yes, I watched it over and over again when I was a kid. So that was fun, but this is where the series just completely starts to go off the rails here. Especially with Brian Tyler Henry's like conspiracy theory guy, Bernie, where I think the movie, this one almost feels like it's the culmination of Godzilla and Kong, but it almost feels like a parody of it. Number 3, Kong Skull Island. So this is a really hard one for me to place because when it comes to Godzilla and Kong, I must admit I am more of a King Kong fan. Maybe it's because I myself am very hairy and they used to call me werewolf and like monkey, when I was a kid. So I identify with a mammal covered in fur. He's kind of the underdog in the fight with Godzilla. He's not this atomic dinosaur. He's just a big gorilla, but he's smart like a person and he's kind of lonely, like I get him. It's weird because I'm a huge fan of the 2005 Peter Jackson King Kong remake. And Kong Skull Island, at least a big chunk of it, feels like a retreading of that story. Granted, different decade, they don't bring Kong back, but just the whole idea of this expedition going to Skull Island and them finding that there's a lot of weird stuff and creatures and natives and Kong fighting these other monsters on the island. A lot of that's the same. So it's hard for me going into this one. I love the Peter Jackson version so much. It was hard to kind of set that aside. That being said, I love the cast of this movie. You've got Tom Hiddleston, you've got Brie Larson, you've got Samuel L. Jackson. There's a lot of cool stuff going on. While at times it does get a little too close to Apocalypse Now, I dig the idea of like setting this monster movie against a backdrop like that. Like saying, hey, what if we did, a Vietnam-esque movie, but it's with King Kong? Number two, Godzilla 2014. So whenever you have, something that builds into a big franchise like this, the first movie I think always has the easiest job and also the hardest job. If you go in knowing you're setting all this stuff up, you're kind of planting little seeds. And that's kind of what this movie does with Monarch. But it's just a really good standalone movie that, to someone who I grew up on the 1998, Matthew Broderick, Roland Emmerich Godzilla movie. And, when I was in fifth grade, I thought, oh, this is the coolest thing ever. As I got older, I'm like, oh, yeah, I see. I see why everyone hated this in the 90s. So it was just cool to see a Godzilla movie that A, took itself seriously, and B, had human characters I actually liked. Now, I know this movie gets a lot of hate because it killed off Bryan Cranston in the first act. Spoiler alert for a 10-year-old movie. I liked that subversion. I liked that it got me. Like, we were all expecting it to be like Heisenberg versus Godzilla. But I really like Aaron Taylor Johnson and Elizabeth Olsen. And I feel like they, along with a supporting cast of people like David Strathairn and Ken Watanabe, were really able to carry this movie. So I didn't mind as much when they kept teasing Godzilla because, again, it's the first time seeing him since 1998, and I feel like the payoff was worth it. The first time he uses that atomic breath in the climax against the Mutos. It's so earned because the movie's been building it to it this entire time. Not to mention, out of all the movies on this list, this movie has some of the most spectacular scenes. Gareth Edwards, very talented filmmaker, and just scenes like the halo jump, the amount of tension you feel in that scene, the way that this movie managed to take Godzilla and actually make him scary. The scariest he's been really until Godzilla minus one. So I think from an objective like filmmaking standpoint, this is probably the best made movie on this list. But it is still only my second favorite, and I'm about to get to why. Number one, Godzilla, King of the Monsters. So no lie, not only is this my favorite movie out of this universe, this movie had one of my favorite trailers ever, to the point that I will sometimes just watch this trailer just to like get hyped up and give myself goosebumps. It's the one that has the instrumental version of Somewhere Over the Rainbow that shows Godzilla fighting Ghidorah. This movie is everything I ever wanted out of a Godzilla movie. Godzilla 2014 kind of reintroduced the character, for a new generation with a new reboot, a new universe. but it kept him mysterious. It teased him, and I think it worked. I think it paid off, but he kind of doesn't really come in until the end. This one, Godzilla is a more active participant, and it's all the monsters. It's like a celebration of his entire legacy. This is the one that sees him go up against. I know, like, this series wanted to pit him and Kong, against each other. Godzilla's biggest rival has always been Ghidorah, and this is a movie that has him fight Ghidorah, defeat Ghidorah, and has one of the most satisfying final sequences ever where all the other monsters are basically like bowing to him as king of the monsters. This is the movie where Godzilla establishes his dominance and his place as Earth's protector, as Earth's Titan warrior. And it's the movie that the humans finally figure out that he's on our side and that, we need to use him. Throw in a really strong supporting human cast, people like Kyle Chandler, Millie Bobby Brown, Vera Farmiga, Charles Dance, again with Ken Watanabe and David Strathairn coming back from the first movie. And there's no weak link in the cast, and there's no weak link in the monster cast. I know that it would have been kind of cool to see, what Kong was doing, and from like the novelization, apparently Skull Island wasn't affected or whatever, but I almost feel like this movie should have come out after Godzilla versus Kong, because this is Godzilla at his highest point as king of the monsters, and it was everything I had wanted the 2014 movie to be, but it's like we had to get through that movie to get to this. And that is my list. I'm sure many of you will have very different opinions. I'd love to hear them down in the comments. Let me know your rankings. Like, share, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff. If you don't, you may end up on the receiving end of Godzilla's atomic breath. And as always, every day is Halloween.